The reception had all the trademarks of the Whitman family: lavish, polished, and meant to prove their dominance. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light across round tables draped in ivory silk, while a string quartet played something delicate in the corner. My cousin Jonathan was marrying Caroline Prescott, and according to my Aunt Eleanor, it was the society event of the season. She'd spent 2 years planning it, and her perfection was on display everywhere you looked. I was placed at table 14, tucked away near the back with distant relatives and acquaintances. It was a familiar placement, close enough to be counted, far enough to be dismissed. From my corner, I could see Jonathan at the head table, smiling and recounting stories of his marketing firm, Whitman Strategies, which he loved to call a boutique agency serving local businesses. Family lore had elevated him into a kind of entrepreneurial prodigy. What amused me most was overhearing whispers about me. Mrs. Langford, one of Aunt Eleanor's bridge club friends, leaned in toward her companion. "Poor Vanessa," she sighed, glancing my way. "She's been struggling for years, some kind of freelance work that barely pays. Always behind on bills." I sipped my champagne and listened. The narrative about me had clearly been passed around like gossip or d'oeuvres. Apparently, I had even borrowed money for tonight's dress news to me, since I'd purchased it outright at Bloomingdale's weeks earlier. But why correct them? They seemed to enjoy their invented version of my life more than reality. When Jonathan rose for a toast, the room hushed. He had always carried himself like the family's golden child, and tonight was no exception. "Success," he declared, holding his glass aloft, "isn't just about money. It's about building something meaningful, contributing, being an example for the next generation." His gaze swept the room, pausing deliberately at my table. Some people understand that. Some are still figuring it out. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but I caught the edge in his tone. He was mocking me, without ever naming me. Heat rose in my cheeks, but I stayed quiet. Let them clap for his speech. Let them believe the story they wanted. Because I knew something they didn't. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel Cho, my partner at Meridian Capital. "Vanessa, the Whitman Strategies acquisition is final. Papers signed. Board meeting Monday." I felt that familiar rush of satisfaction. For 3 months, we'd been orchestrating the deal. As of 4 p.m. that afternoon, Jonathan's firm no longer belonged to him. It belonged to me. Aunt Eleanor eventually drifted to my table, wearing her emerald dress and a look of forced concern. "Darling, don't take Jonathan's words personally. He's just passionate about success." I smiled politely, nodding as she murmured about my situation. Apparently, she had been the source of many of the rumors. Everyone was so certain of my financial ruin, so confident in a fiction they'd built together. I excused myself and stepped out to the terrace to take a call from Daniel. "It's official," he said. "Meridian now owns Whitman Strategies. $12.4 million, just as negotiated. Jonathan has no idea it was all done through Pinnacle Digital, our subsidiary." I looked back inside at Jonathan, basking in attention. "When do we tell him?" I asked. "Monday. Do you want me to handle it?" "No," I said, watching him toast his new in-laws. "I'll handle it myself." But the night wasn't finished with surprises. My phone rang again. Uncle Richard, Jonathan's father and owner of Whitman Industries, the family's manufacturing company. "Vanessa," he said, "I just got an offer to sell the business. $15 million. All cash. Closing in 30 days. The firm is called Meridian Capital." My pulse quickened. Daniel had moved ahead faster than I'd expected. We'd been eyeing Whitman Industries for months. Now both family companies were falling into my portfolio. When I returned to the ballroom, Jonathan had drifted to my table, glassy-eyed from champagne. "Vanessa," he announced loudly, "I can't share details, but my firm's about to be acquired by a major group. Pinnacle Digital Holdings. It's going to set us up for life." Mrs. Langford beamed at him like he was royalty. He went on about buying a house, starting a family, expanding his empire. I let him talk. Uncle Richard joined us minutes later, looking uneasy. "Jonathan, I've just had an offer for Whitman Industries. $15 million. From Meridian Capital." The words hung in the air. Jonathan laughed it off at first, but then Uncle Richard pulled out his phone and read aloud from public filings. "Pinnacle Digital Holdings is a subsidiary of Meridian Capital. The same company is buying both businesses." Jonathan froze, his glass slipping from his hand and shattering across the floor. The ballroom fell silent. That was my cue. I stepped forward. Actually, I said evenly, I know quite a bit about Meridian. Jonathan's voice was a whisper. How? Because I own it. The silence was suffocating. Faces turned toward me in disbelief. Aunt Eleanor's lips parted, speechless. Mrs. Langford looked like she'd swallowed her pearls. You? Jonathan finally stammered. You can't even pay your own bills. Who told you that? I asked. Everyone knows. Mom said, you assumed. I cut him off. You all assumed. You whispered about me, pitted me, dismissed me, and none of you ever asked. The revelation rippled through the room like an earthquake. Gasps, murmurs, stunned silence. When I added that Meridian managed over $300 million in assets, someone audibly choked. Jonathan shook his head like he was waking from a nightmare. If you had all that money, why sit at table 14? Because it was easier than correcting you, I said. Easier than explaining myself to people who already believed a lie. Uncle Richard sat heavily in a chair, staring at me with something between awe and regret. Vanessa, are you telling me you own both Whitman Strategies and Whitman Industries? As of today, yes, I replied calmly. One deal is closed, the other is pending your decision. Jonathan's voice cracked. What about me? My position? We'll discuss that Monday, I told him. At 9 a.m. in my office. You'll have a role, but you'll be reporting to the new management team. The reality settled on him like a stone. The cousin he had mocked his entire life, the one dismissed as a failure, was now his boss. The rest of the evening was a blur of questions, apologies, and shocked relatives trying to reconcile the fiction they'd embraced with the truth standing in front of them. The final moment I'll never forget was Uncle Richard pulling me aside as the reception ended. His eyes were heavy but sincere. Vanessa, what will you do with Whitman Industries? I met his gaze. Grow it. Modernize it. Double the workforce in 5 years. I don't buy companies to gut them. I buy them to build them. For the first time, his expression softened. I should have said this years ago, but I'm proud of you. Driving home, I replayed the night scenes. Jonathan's smug toast, the gossip about my dress, the champagne glass shattering when truth landed. By Monday, my family would have to see me as I truly was, not as the failure they'd invented. The sweetest revenge hadn't required planning, just timing and finally refusing to stay silent.